My name is Jeff Cardwell, and I'm Dick's oldest son and one of 4 children.
Your father seems to have struck a balance between home and work life. What was it like growing up in your family?
We had a pretty idyllic life growing up. My dad used to say that if he had to describe his life in one word, it was going to be the word easy, because my mom made everything easy for him, and she kind of ran the household, and he said that he let her make little decisions like where they lived and how many children they had and things like that, and he got to do some of the other things. So we'd go to the dad's newspaper conventions someplace in the United States, and we would always drive there, so we would go through lots of states and always have a planned itinerary. And I played a lot of golf with my dad. He had a love of the game of golf, and that lasted all his life. And it was either, I'd be caddying for him, or we'd be playing or fishing somewhere and wading a little stream. So it was a great life growing up in the Cardwell family.
What legislative action was he involved in that provided a precedent for the press today?
Well, he actually wrote and authored the public right to know and open door legislation for the state laws for Indiana, and he was a proponent for First Amendment rights and freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and was a nationally recognized expert in that field.
My name is John Diltz, and I'm a retired professor from Indiana University in Bloomington from the School of Journalism. I have my background, it really is in journalism and in newspapers. I worked as the city editor at the Peru Tribune in the 1970s and went to law school from there. After I finished law school, I worked at the Court of Appeals for a year. I first met Dick Cardwell in the late 70s when he was working on drafting the open door law in Indiana for access to information.
The open door law was written for public right to know and public right to information, so that meetings held in a board setting had to be open to the public and recordable by the public, so that it eliminated some of the behind the scenes politicking that went on in some of those boards, because now the meetings were public and the public had a right to attend. So it was a very important legislation, certainly relating it to freedom of speech, freedom of press.
It was an important piece of legislation and a model piece of legislation for the country. He did most of the drafting, and he did most of the arguing, and he did and marshaled it through the General Assembly. And he knew how it worked. He knew the politics of it. He knew the importance of it.
Was there a particular event that motivated your dad to start drafting this legislation?
I don't know of a specific event, but my guess is that one of the newspapers came to him and said that there was a meeting that they wanted to attend that they were being excluded from, and that what can you do about that? And so I remember many evenings of him sitting smoking his pipe with a red pencil and or pen in hand, going through the wording of the open door legislation that he wrote, making edits and corrections and additions and so things like that.
He may have been, I think, the smartest lawyer that I ever knew. He was smart, he was clever, he was very careful, and he knew law that I think a lot of lawyers had forgotten the day they left law school. He could recite cases, he could just pull things up just from this very fertile mind that he had.
It sounds like your father was not only involved in law, but writing as well. Was that a passion for him throughout his life?
Yeah, he worked on, like I said, the school newspaper, and worked in the IU information department. He also, when he was the general counsel for the Hoosier State Press Association, published a weekly newsletter called the Indiana Publisher. So he edited and published that, and he wrote articles to put in that every week, something different about Indiana called Forever Hoosier. And the kids compiled articles into a book form for him a few years ago, and so we now have a copy of all of the articles in the columns that he wrote for the Indiana Publisher. And we have all the letters he wrote to Mom. There are dozens, if not hundreds of them, and he wrote poetry and prose and also just all these wonderful letters. He wrote to other people. He wrote letters long after email was more the style.
He was remarkably kind to me. He would listen. He was interested in what you had to say, and he was just a remarkable person to be around. And so, in a lot of ways, I always wanted to be able to emulate that kind of professional and personal persona that Dick had. I was never as good a lawyer as he was. I was never as smart as he was, and I played terrible golf. But he really was kind of a model in that way. He was busy, and he didn't have any help there at the Hoosier State Press Association. He was everything. He was the researcher. He was the director. He was the lawyer. He was all of these things, and so he would farm stuff out to me. And so we would collaborate on a lot of cases, the result of which I learned a lot about how law works in Indiana and how politics works in Indiana and how the two kind of come together, particularly when it involved media. He had a mind that was just far-ranging in so many ways. And he liked literature and poetry, and he could quote it and he could write it. It's really quite an interesting person to know.
He had a lifelong love of writing, and he wrote letters and poetry from an early age. He worked on the high school red and blue Kokomo High School newspaper. He also was a part of the sports information team at Indiana University, and so he wrote lots of articles about the sporting events down there. So it's just something he just liked all his life and was very interested in.
Can you describe your father's passion for sports and golf especially?
Well, he was a three-sport athlete, football and basketball and golf. And at IU, he was good enough to play as a freshman in all three sports, but he was always passionate about the game of golf. He was a four-year letterman at IU. He won the Big Ten Long Drive Championship as a sophomore, hitting it 339 yards with a Balata ball and a persimmon driver, and was a terrific amateur golfer, won many awards and recognitions for his career in golf, including the Wagner Award, which is given to an individual each year for just kind of contributions to the game and his overall ethical approach to the game. So it's something he just enjoyed all his life. I think he played over 3,000 different golf courses as a writer for Golf Digest, and kept meticulous records of every round he played of golf from his high school years on. So he had kind of a photographic memory, and you could ask him, okay, you played Pebble Beach, what'd you hit on the third hole? And he'd tell you it was a 9-iron to the green and he two-putted. So pretty amazing. Dad was awarded the Sagamore of the Wabash Award, which was one of his things that he had gotten and received as a recognition from the governor of the state of Indiana. It's the highest award a citizen can get in Indiana. He taught law and press law and information law at Indiana University in Indianapolis, IUPUI, and also at Butler University. So he was pretty accomplished in other areas other than just the journalism law. He had a lifetime love for the game of golf and a lifetime of love for my mom, which was great, and set a foundation for us as kids of how you should be in a relationship. They were married for 63 years, and he, when he met her, walked by her in the hall at school, he said, "That's it, I'm done." And he went and introduced himself to her, and they were married about 6 years later.
What do you think your dad would have thought about being inducted into the Hall of Legends?
Well, he would have viewed it as a tremendous honor. He loved Kokomo and Howard County, even though he moved to Indianapolis to pursue his law career, that he often was in Kokomo, either early on visiting his parents or then later see great-grandkids. So they would have been up to 18 great-grandchildren now, including 2 little girls born just this last week. They were all about family, and they would have loved that, but he would have been tremendously honored by this recognition, I'm sure.